on this episode of Indiana Education Insight.
I want parents to be supportive of their young people and whatever they choose, whether it be athletics or the arts or academic pursuits. Be supportive, be active, be involved in the young person's life.
Every week, the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents is taking you inside today's Indiana education collaboration and tomorrow's education trends. We're staying on the pulse of public school innovators throughout Indiana and beyond. Join our conversation and contribute to our upcoming topics at iapssin.org/podcast. Here's your host, Dr. J.T. Coopman.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Indiana Education Insight. I'm Dr. J.T. Coopman, Executive Director of the IHSAA. I'm proud to host this weekly show featuring Indiana education innovators from all over our great state, discussing trending topics in the public education space and bringing in a variety of Indiana education innovators to hear from their perspective. This podcast is brought to you by the IPSS team and produced by our friends at Edge Media Studios. As with any organization, it takes skilled leadership to be successful, and that is one of the main missions of IPSS, developing great public education leaders. We're always excited to hear from experienced and passionate educators, so let's get started with today's conversation.
Topics and trends in Indiana education.
Before we get started with the introduction of today's guest, I think it's only appropriate that we acknowledge that today is the anniversary of September 11th, a day that certainly for the United States of America, that our world changed. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all of the first responders and those that keep us safe in the military and allow us to live in this wonderful country that we have so many freedoms that we certainly cannot take for granted. Also want to acknowledge the fact that we've had two back-to-back hurricanes and so many people are displaced and kids are out of school. Educational leaders are trying to do what they can to put kids back in school, and the devastation that Florida and Texas have suffered, we certainly offer our prayers and thoughts to those folks that are dealing with those disasters in those areas, let alone the islands and the many offshore places that were hit with the hurricane. So I thought it was appropriate today for us to acknowledge that, and please allow me this opportunity to do so. Today's guest is Mr. Bobby Cox, Commissioner of the Indiana High School Athletic Association. Mr. Cox has served as an administrator, teacher, and coach previous to his work at the IHSAA. So having the ability to look at education from various lenses is very important. And of course, Mr. Cox has been a tremendous asset to public education in Indiana. Let's find out how he views the issues of Indiana public schools. Welcome, Mr. Cox. We're thrilled to have you with us today. So if you could tell us a little bit about your background and your role as the Commissioner of the IHSAA.
Well, thank you, JT. The IHSAA was started in 1903, so we are in our 115th year of existence.
Wow.
We are there to govern high school sports, provide wholesome amateur athletics in our state. Currently, we have 409 member schools, 160,000 student athletes. And my job as the Chief Administrative Officer is to make sure that this thing all goes in the right direction and work with groups that are interested in high school young people and high school athletics specifically, and work with all the agencies that work in education. So that's pretty much what I do, and I'm happy to be here with you today.
Well, we certainly appreciate you making time to be with us today. You have an interest in helping Indiana public schools in a variety of ways. What are your association's most prolific means of assisting schools and athletes and coaches?
Well, our message, JT, is that athletics needs to remain subservient to the academic missions of our schools. And so the IHSAA is working constantly with member school principals and superintendents to ensure that athletics keeps its proper perspective within the education scene. And by doing that, we we work with our principals, athletic directors, and coaches in trying to make sure that we're investing in young people, doing the right things to ensure that their experience is robust and that they are participating in athletics, but academics is first and foremost in their mind.
Absolutely. I know that you have some new initiatives that you have started in recent years, and some even in recent weeks. Can you tell us about some of these new initiatives that you've helped elevate coaches and athletes that you serve?
Well, the one thing I'm most proud of is within the last couple of years, we've started the IHSAA Foundation. And the foundation is an arm of the IHSAA that will raise funds for our member schools to work on educational initiatives. And we've just hired a new president, and Matt Wolfert, and he's hit the ground running. And we've already had some initiatives that have been rolled out, and we're actually right in the middle of them. One I'm very excited about is the Inside Out Coaching Initiative that is based upon the book written by Joe Ehrmann, a former Baltimore Colt, and now travels the country. And with the help of the NFL Foundation and our partners, the Indianapolis Colts, we're able to roll this initiative out. What we're trying to do is build a better coach. We're trying to build a transformational coach, an individual that will invest in the lives of young people and create their opportunity to move on to post-secondary, whatever that might be. You mentioned in the opening about our freedoms and protecting our freedoms. And if that's what we're there to do, then we certainly want to do that to the best of our ability. Whether our young folks go into a 4-year college program, a 2-year college program, into some kind of vocation, into law enforcement or fire, whatever it is to serve our communities, military, we need to make sure that we're doing what we can to prepare those young people, and we're using athletics as that avenue to do that.
Right. Well, I had the good fortune, and thanks to you for allowing me to attend the Inside Out session about a week ago. I found it to be extremely inspiring, and the message was very, very positive, and quite honestly, the message that needs to be conveyed through athletic directors to their coaches. And I was fortunate enough to have coaches in my life that changed my life, to be honest with you. So I know the value of athletics, and I appreciate what the IHSAA is doing to help coaches focus on those kinds of things. So I appreciate that. Do you have some of your association's priorities and initiatives that you have developed to work together to ensure successful outcomes in high schools and for athletic directors? Is there anything besides Inside Out coaching that you've been doing?
The association continues to support all of our member schools financially. We just released our annual report, and within the annual report, it will reflect that the IHSA has returned over $3 million to its member schools in reimbursements. We return more money to our association members than the association retains to run the organization. And we've had that formula that's gone on for years, and we're very happy and fortunate that we have such good fan support across the Hoosier State to allow that to occur.
Right.
And subsequently, that funding helps our athletic departments. The educational piece is another part of things that we do. A lot of online education now with our partners at the National Federation, and ongoing educational initiatives, not just take a couple courses and be finished with it, but each year and each 2 years adding to your curriculum and doing more things and talking about pertinent issues that are out there, how to engage effectively with parents, how to the proper boundaries that coaches should maintain with student athletes, the X's and O's, everybody knows how to do that, but it's all the other effective things that we need to focus on in order to have a better coach and to really build what we're trying to do with education-based athletics.
Now, occasionally, the Indiana legislature tries to get involved in the IHSAA's business. So have there been any bills recently that have affected the way that you do business or things that coaches and athletes should be aware of?
The only bill that's passed within the last couple of years that directly affects IHSAA member schools is the bill with respect to coach education. And now there's a state law that requires every coach, not just football coaches, but every coach, to renew their education in concussion management. And that's a 2-year window that they must complete now, each 2 years, in order to stay current with Indiana law. That's the only thing that we've really dealt with. I would tell you that the legislature's been pretty supportive in the last few years. We've been able to make good friends in the legislature and have an open line of communication and with respect to concussion education and other health and safety issues. Also educationally, as you might know, we've added a homeschool rule and a virtual school rule to our bylaws in the last few years. And that was in cooperation with the legislature to try to open our opportunities up for more kids. And there are parents in our state that feel that homeschooling and virtual schooling is best for their child. Well, if there's a way for us to create an opportunity for what we believe is another half of education and a very important half, then we've done that. And so we continue to have dialogue with the legislature and like I said, a lot of great supporters, and we'll continue to do that.
Let's expand a little bit on the concussion awareness, and that's a hot topic across all elements of athletics right now. What role is the IHSAA playing in concussion awareness, and how we're dealing with student athletes that do have concussions?
Well, the aforementioned courses, the concussion and sport course that is produced by the National Federation, that's a course that every coach in Indiana has to take every 2 years. But in addition to that education piece, we've worked hard with our members to be aware of other areas within health and safety and all those other relationships that I think are very important. And I think putting that all together in a package that really moves the focus away from just wins and losses into a total coach and into a total athletic department serves our students and our patrons better.
Okay. Title IX has always been an interesting scenario for us to deal with. Is there anything out there that you're seeing in the future for Indiana athletics and coaches outside of Title IX, or anything else that you're seeing?
I don't know that there's anything in Title IX that I'm real concerned with. Our opportunities for young ladies continues to increase, and that's happened since 1972, since the passage of Title IX.
Sure.
One of the things that every state association is now starting to grasp with is the transgender athlete.
Yeah.
And with respect to facilities and which team they're going to participate on when they transgender from one to the next, and how that looks and what everybody's policy is. We've worked with local advocacy groups here in Indianapolis and around the state to discuss this topic. We have a gender policy just like every state has, and we've worked with these groups to see if there's some flexibility to try to modify those policies and make them more applicable than they are. Those groups are more in tune with these various populations, probably more so than the IHSAA. And so we look for their guidance and their leadership to help us with these various policies. And at the end of the conversation, what we're trying to do is provide opportunities for as many kids as possible.
Yeah.
And if there are transgender students that wish to play in our member schools, then we're going to try to make that happen.
Hadn't even thought about that, to be honest with you. Certainly that's an issue that many school districts across the country are dealing with. How much interaction do you have with other athletic associations in other states, and do you have a national meeting that you attend? And
Actually, we have several. I'm getting ready to go to one next week. The National Federation of State High School Associations, the IHSAA, is a member with 50 other state associations. That includes the District of Columbia. We meet in the fall as a section. So I'll be meeting with my colleagues from Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, and Iowa in Section 4. And every section in the country does that in the fall. We reconvene in the winter, and we have a winter meeting, and that includes the executive directors or commissioners and the NFHS staff. In the spring, we have a legal meeting and summit, and that includes those same group of directors and commissioners, but they also bring their legal counsel with them, and we talk about legal issues around the country. And then the largest meeting is the NFHS summer meeting, and that's where the entire staff of the IHSAA attends, along with our board members. And there's programming for assistant commissioners, board members, and there's a lot of recognition that goes on at that meeting. The National High School Hall of Fame banquet is the culminating event of that summer meeting, and Indiana's been very fortunate to have 14 inductees into the National High School Hall of Fame. So we have a lot of collaboration with our colleagues around the country, both at my level and the assistants level, and And it's good to hear what's going on around the country. You learn some things. You learn that you're doing some good things in some areas, and you need to brush up on some other areas. And I think that sharing that happens at the federation level is really beneficial to our organization.
Good, good. I agree with you. As a relatively new association executive director, if I had not attended those national meetings and learned from some of the colleagues that have been doing this for quite some time, I would have been in a world of hurt. So those national meetings are very important. One of the things that the IHSAA also deals with, and I apologize for going off script here a little bit.
That's okay.
Is how you deal with the officials that officiate all of these contests, and what's the IHSAA's role in dealing with officials?
Well, we license over 7,000 individuals to be contest officials across this state. Now, the majority of those individuals do not officiate high school sports. They get our licensure because it provides them some validity out in the community, and they may work rec ball, they may work dads clubs and YMCAs and things of that nature, but just a little less than half of those are high school officials. And it's our job to educate them to the rules of the contest, the rules of the game, of whatever sport they choose to license in. And then also we are tasked with making sure that officials are available for our member schools throughout the regular season, that they hire in contract. And then we need to supply officials for our tournament series events. And that's a pretty large task when you have 305 football games in the tournament series, and you've got to find that many crews. You got to find 150 crews to start the tournament and move them around the state and advance to the state championships and have 6 crews that are qualified. And it's a challenge. And officiating is at a critical spot right now. There is a crossroads here, and I think the listeners would be well served to know that we need more officials.
Yep.
And not only do we need more officials, but our general public, we need to understand the role that they're playing. They're just like the coach. They're just like the administrator. They have a vital role in the contest itself. And without officials, we can't play games. Right. And so kids lose opportunities.
Yep.
And so subsequently, we need to educate officials, but we also need to educate our coaches and our players and our fans. And one of the things I like to talk about a lot is if everybody just stays in their lane, we'll be fine. Coaches need to coach. Parents need to cheer hard for their kids. Officials need to officiate, and the kids need to play the game. And if everybody does that,
Yep.
It's a pretty good game.
Yep. Well, I agree with you. I'm kind of amazed that so many young kids don't even look to be an official. And I started officiating when I was 18 years old, and officiated for 18 years and enjoyed every minute of it. And it's certainly an enjoyable weekend activity if you don't have other things going on. So I hope we get more people involved with officiating.
We're working hard with our member schools to recruit kids that an individual, once they've graduated from high school, may obtain a license. We work with our colleges and universities in Indiana. We actually grant 240 free licensures every year. We have 24 state associations around our state, local associations for officials. IOA is one of them here in Indianapolis, Fall Creek,
Right.
or Lake County. They're all over the state.
Right.
And we grant them 10 free licensures every year. Go out there and find somebody. We have found that the best recruiter for officials are officials.
Right.
And I can even remember back in the day when I was still coaching and teaching, I was a bad basketball official. It's probably good I don't have a license anymore. But nonetheless, we need more people out there to officiate these games, adjudicate these contests, and give kids an opportunity to play.
Yeah. I can't imagine you being bad at anything, to be honest with you.
You just have to ask a few coaches.
So in closing, any advice that you have for parents, coaches, and athletes in this ever-changing landscape of athletics?
I do have some advice. I want parents to be supportive of their young people and whatever they choose, whether it be athletics or the arts or academic pursuits. Be supportive, be active, be involved in the young person's life, take an active role and interest. If it's athletics and you choose to come to the game, as I said earlier, cheer hard for your kid. Don't cheer against the other kid. Don't yell at the officials. They're out there trying to do a job. They're doing the best they can. They really don't care who wins the game. Let them do their job. Let coaches coach. Coaches make mistakes. Kids make mistakes on the field. That's just part of the human experience.
Right.
And if we let everybody just fulfill their role, high school sports and education-based athletics in this state can be very beneficial and very enjoyable.
Well, one of the things that I have gleaned from this short conversation is the fact that your focus is always on the student athlete. And you have repeatedly said that, and let me tell you how much I appreciate that. It's about giving kids opportunity, and that's something that I think is ingrained in your philosophy and that of the IHSAA.
I appreciate that, JT. And the reality is they are the customer. There's 160,000 customers out there, and that's who those student athletes, that's who we need to be serving. And so when you get into these conversations that are adjunct about how you run a tournament or how you do this or how you do that, if you can just go back and think about the 160,000 kids you're serving, then it's great work.
Yep, absolutely. One other question before we close today, and something that we're seeing more and more, and that's video review. What's the IHSAA's position on video review?
Well, it's not in our rules code except for in the sport of basketball to determine the last possession of a game. That's the only place that video review is in our rules code. This is a discussion that goes on frequently amongst all the rules committees, regardless of the sport. We're taking the human element a little bit out of the game, and at the professional level, when there's millions of dollars that are under concern here or being under consideration, maybe you need replay. College, maybe it's the same thing, but in the high school level, we're just trying to play a game here, and their games are important, and there's some state championships involved, but it's kind of like I call it. I try to play golf. I'm not a very good golfer either, but I try to play. And I call it the rub of the green. Sometimes the ball just doesn't bounce your way. Sometimes you don't get the call. But there's a lesson to be learned by that. The reality is life's not always fair. And sometimes you get a bad call in life. Sometimes you get a bad call in a game. You learn to deal with that. You learn how to deal with adversity. Those are one of the great lessons that we teach in education-based athletics. So I'm not a video review fan. I go to a lot of games. I go to a lot of college games. It's painful experience now to go to a college football game when it's almost a 4-hour game because we're stopping the game all the time.
Right.
Just play the game and have fun with it.
I am certainly glad to hear that because I've not been a big fan at any level on video replay and review. It's a game played by human beings and it's officiated by human beings, and that's the way that it should be.
That's exactly right.
And it was that way for years and years and years. So I'm glad to hear that, to be honest with you.
Great.
So thank you, Mr. Cox, for being our guest on IPSS's edition of Indiana Education Insight. Now it's time to wrap up this episode with my take on the current state of affairs in the Indiana education landscape.
Dr. JT's closing comments.
Unfortunately, even though we have so much research about the fact that Indiana and all states are facing a teacher shortage, just like we need a commitment to high-quality public schools and educators, we need to make an investment in high-quality teacher preparation program for our public schools. It is my hope we can demonstrate the value of well-prepared teachers in our state by showing them respect, paying them well, and providing them with some form of benefit that will ensure their future moving forward. It is my hope that we can get our legislators and our state leaders to continue these programs on behalf of Hoosier communities. However, much of this research has been dismissed by some of our legislators. I see these as investments in our children and in our state, not as an expenditure. Perhaps we can pursue this issue and others in another segment. On our next show, on September 25th, we welcome Mr. Joel Hand, an attorney and lead lobbyist for the Indiana Public Education Coalition. Perhaps he can provide some additional insight into the State House and education. Join us for that and more on the next Insight into Indiana Education. Thanks for being part of education, and please stand up for Indiana Public Schools.